Rich man lost his wallet. The homeless woman who returned it got more than she dreamed. The morning rush hour in downtown Chicago painted the streets with a familiar chaos of honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the distant rumble of the train overhead. Michael Richardson adjusted his expensive Italian tie as he stepped out of his black Mercedes, the crisp October air cutting through his tailored wool coat. At 52, Michael had built an empire in commercial real estate, his name etched on half the skyscrapers that pierced the Chicago skyline. "Mr. Richardson, your 9 a.m. with the Henderson Group is confirmed." His assistant Sarah called from the passenger seat, her voice barely audible over the street noise. "And don't forget the charity gala planning meeting at noon." Michael nodded, curtly, his mind already racing through the day's negotiations. He grabbed his leather briefcase and smartphone, patting his jacket pocket out of habit to ensure his wallet was secure. The gesture had become second nature after years of navigating the city's bustling streets. "I'll call you after the Henderson meeting," he said, closing the car door with a decisive thud. As Michael strode toward the towering glass building that housed his offices, his phone buzzed with an urgent text from his business partner. Without breaking stride, he pulled out his device, his attention immediately consumed by the message about a potential deal worth millions. The sidewalk was a river of people, each person locked in their own world of destinations and deadlines. Michael weaved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, his fingers flying across his phone screen as he typed a response. It was then, in that moment of divided attention, that disaster struck. A jogger, earbuds in and lost in her morning run, bumped into Michael's shoulder just as he was putting his phone away. The collision was minor, barely noticeable to either party, but it was enough. Michael's wallet, which he had loosened from his jacket pocket while retrieving his phone, tumbled silently to the concrete sidewalk. Neither Michael nor the jogger noticed. She continued her run with a quick, "Sorry," thrown over her shoulder, while Michael, still focused on his business call, disappeared into the revolving doors of his building. The wallet lay there on the busy sidewalk like a small island in an ocean of hurrying feet. It was an expensive piece, genuine leather, probably worth more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Inside, it held not just cash but the keys to Michael's entire life, credit cards, his driver's license, business cards, and most importantly, a family photo tucked behind his American Express black card. For 20 minutes, the wallet remained untouched, stepped over and around by hundreds of passing strangers. In a city like Chicago, people had learned to mind their own business, to keep their eyes forward and their pace quick. The wallet might have stayed there until evening, or until someone with less noble intentions discovered it. But then, Sarah Martinez appeared around the corner. At 38, Sarah had been living on Chicago's streets for 6 months. Her story wasn't unique, a series of unfortunate events that began with a medical emergency, followed by job loss, then eviction. She carried her entire world in a worn backpack and a small cart she'd fashioned from a shopping basket and bicycle wheels. Sarah's clothes were clean but worn, layers upon layers to combat the October chill. Her graying brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and despite everything she'd been through, her green eyes still held a spark of determination that homelessness hadn't managed to extinguish. She was returning from the nearby community center where she'd been able to shower and grab a small breakfast when she spotted the wallet. At first, she almost walked past it. In her experience, stopping to help often led to accusations and trouble. But something made her pause. "Excuse me," she called to a businessman hurrying past. "Did you drop this?" The man barely glanced at her, shaking his head dismissively before disappearing into the crowd. Sarah looked down at the wallet, then around at the stream of people. She could feel the weight of it in her hand. There was definitely cash inside, probably enough to buy a warm meal and maybe even a night in a cheap motel. For someone in her situation, finding money on the street wasn't just luck, It was survival. But as Sarah opened the wallet to see if she could identify the owner, her conscience wouldn't let her keep it. The driver's license photo showed a well-dressed man with salt and pepper hair and serious brown eyes. Michael Richardson, it read. The address was in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most expensive neighborhoods. Great, Sarah muttered to herself. Of course it belongs to someone who won't even miss it. But that wasn't the point, and Sarah knew it. Her mother had raised her better than that, had taught her that integrity wasn't conditional on circumstances. Even when you had nothing, you still had your character. Sarah studied the business card tucked behind the license. Richardson Commercial Properties, CEO. The office address was just a few blocks away. She looked up at the towering buildings around her, trying to locate the right one. Well, Mr. Richardson, she said quietly, looks like this is your lucky day. The journey to Richardson Commercial Properties took Sarah through a part of the city that might as well have been another world. The sidewalks grew cleaner, the buildings taller and shinier, the people better dressed. She was acutely aware of how she looked, how the security guard's eyes followed her, how other pedestrians gave her a wider berth. When she finally reached the gleaming lobby of Michael's building, the contrast couldn't have been starker. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the quiet hum of central air conditioning created an atmosphere of wealth and power that felt alien to someone who'd been sleeping in doorways. The security guard at the front desk, a large man named Tommy according to his name tag, looked up as Sarah approached. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely concealed suspicion in a matter of seconds. "Can I help you?" Tommy asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather not. "I need to return something to Michael Richardson," Sarah said, holding up the wallet. He dropped it on the street. Tommy's eyes narrowed. "Let me see that." Sarah handed over the wallet, watching as Tommy examined it. She could see the exact moment he realized it was genuine. His eyebrows shot up as he saw the thick stack of cash and premium credit cards. "Where exactly did you find this?" Tommy asked, his tone still skeptical. "On the sidewalk outside, about 3 blocks down. The owner's business card says he works here." Tommy studied Sarah for a long moment, clearly trying to decide whether to believe her story. Finally, he picked up his phone. "Mr. Richardson, this is Tommy in the lobby. I have someone here who says they found your wallet." "Yes, sir, a woman." "No, sir, she looks like she might be homeless." "Yes." "Sir, I'll send her up." Tommy hung up and looked at Sarah with a mixture of surprise and newfound respect. "He says his wallet's missing and he wants to see you." 23rd floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. Sarah watched the numbers climb, each floor taking her further from the world she knew and deeper into one where she clearly didn't belong. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, she was greeted by a receptionist whose smile was polite but strained. "Mr. Richardson is waiting for you in his office," the receptionist said, gesturing down a hallway lined with expensive artwork. Michael's office was a shrine to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, awards and photographs, documenting decades of achievement, furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. Michael himself stood behind his massive desk, still wearing his expensive coat, his face a mask of professional composure. "You found my wallet?" he asked, his tone neutral but curious. Sarah stepped forward and placed the wallet on his desk. "Yes, sir. It was on the sidewalk about 3 blocks from here. I checked the ID to see who it belonged to." Michael opened the wallet, quickly verifying that everything was still there. His expression shifted to one of genuine surprise as he realized nothing was missing. Not the $800 in cash, not the credit cards, nothing. "You didn't take anything," he said, and it was more of a question than a statement. "No, sir. It's not mine to take." Michael studied Sarah's face, taking in her weathered appearance, her layered clothing, the weariness around her eyes that spoke of hard times. He'd expected someone to find his wallet eventually, but he'd assumed it would be cleaned out by the time it was returned, if it was returned at all. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah Martinez." "Well, Sarah Martinez, I have to say I'm impressed. Not many people would have returned this intact." Michael reached into the wallet and pulled out $200 bills. "Please, take this as a reward." Sarah looked at the money, more than she'd seen in months, but shook her head. "I don't need a reward for doing the right thing." "I insist," Michael said, holding out the bills. "You went out of your way to return this. The least I can do is compensate you for your time and honesty." Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with her practical needs. $200 would solve a lot of immediate problems, but accepting it felt too much like charity, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't become the kind of person who took handouts. "Thank you, but no," she said finally. "I'm just glad you got your wallet back." Michael stared at her, completely baffled. In his world, everyone had an angle, everyone wanted something. Yet here stood a woman who clearly needed money, turning down a reward that was freely offered. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I mean, you look like you could use," he caught himself. Realizing how his words might sound, Sarah's back straightened. "Like I could use what, Mr. Richardson? Charity?" "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And you're right. I could use the money. I could use a lot of things. But I didn't return your wallet for money. I returned it because it was the right thing to do." Sarah turned toward the door. "Have a good day, sir." "Wait," Michael called out, something in her dignity and quiet strength stopping him. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." Sarah turned back, her expression guarded. "Look," Michael continued, "I deal with a lot of people in my business. Most of them would have taken the money and probably everything else in that wallet too. You're different. I respect that. Different doesn't pay for food or shelter, Mr. Richardson. But it does let me sleep at night, even when that's on a park bench." The honesty of her words hit Michael like a physical blow. He realized he was looking at someone who had lost everything, but had somehow managed to hold on to something he wasn't sure he possessed himself: true integrity. "How long have you been on the streets?" he asked, his tone gentler now. 6 months, Sarah replied. "Lost my job, couldn't pay medical bills, got evicted." "It happens faster than you think." Michael walked around his desk, moving closer to the windows that overlooked the city. From this height, the people on the streets looked like ants there. Individual struggles invisible from his lofty perch. "What did you do? Before, I mean." "I was a social worker. Helped at-risk kids navigate the system, find resources, stay in school." Sarah's voice carried a note of wistfulness. "Ironic, isn't it? I spent years helping other people avoid the system, and then I fell through the cracks myself." Michael turned back to face her. "Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Okay, what if I told you I could help? Not charity, not a handout, but a real opportunity to get back on your feet?" Sarah's expression remained skeptical. "I'd ask what you want in return." "Nothing. Just the chance to prove that your faith in people doing the right thing isn't misplaced." "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the offer, but I don't even know you. And you don't know me. For all you know, I could be a drug addict or a criminal, or are you?" "No, but then what's the problem?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Michael's face for any sign of insincerity or hidden motives. "Why would you want to help me?" Michael was quiet too, considering his answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about Sarah's unwavering honesty in the face of obvious need had shaken something loose in him, made him question assumptions he'd held for years. "Because," he said finally, "in 30 years of business, I've met thousands of people. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, people who are supposed to be the best our society has to offer. And most of them would have taken my money and found a way to justify it. You gave it back and asked for nothing. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." As they stood there in that gleaming office, with the city sprawling below them, both Michael and Sarah felt the weight of a moment that would change everything. Neither of them could have predicted that a lost wallet would be the beginning of a journey that would transform not just their lives, but their understanding of what it truly means to be human. The first chapter of their story was ending, but the real adventure was just beginning. 3 days had passed since Sarah returned Michael's wallet, and he couldn't stop thinking about their encounter. It had stirred something in him that he'd thought was long buried under years of corporate dealings and calculated decisions. That evening, as he sat in his Lincoln Park penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Michael made a decision that surprised even him. He was going to find Sarah Martinez. The next morning, instead of heading straight to his office, Michael drove through the neighborhoods where Chicago's homeless population often gathered. He checked the areas around Union Station, Grant Park, and the various shelters and community centers downtown. It took him nearly 4 hours, but he finally spotted Sarah near the Chicago River, sitting on a bench with her small cart of belongings beside her dot. She was reading a book, a worn paperback that looked like it had been through several hands. Even in her difficult circumstances, she was trying to maintain some normalcy, some connection to the person she used to be. "Sarah?" Michael called as he approached. She looked up, surprised to see him. "Mr. Richardson, what are you doing here?" "Looking for you, actually. Mind if I sit?" Sarah gestured to the empty space on the bench, closing her book. "This is unexpected." Michael sat down, suddenly feeling uncertain about his plan. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about what I said regarding helping you, and I have a proposition. But first, I want you to know something about me." Michael stared out at the river, watching a small boat navigate the choppy waters. "I wasn't always wealthy, Sarah. I grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment in Pilsen with my mother. My father left when I was 7, and my mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat." Sarah listened, sensing this wasn't a story he told often. "When I was 12, my mother got sick, cancer. We couldn't afford the treatment, couldn't afford to miss work for doctor's appointments. I watched her deteriorate while the system failed us at every turn." Michael's voice grew quiet. "She died when I was 16. I was on my own after that." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "The point is, I know what it's like to be forgotten by society. I clawed my way out through scholarships, student loans, and sheer determination. But somewhere along the way, I forgot where I came from. I became the kind of person who would walk past someone like you without a second thought." Michael turned to face her. "Until you returned my wallet. You reminded me that integrity isn't a luxury for people who can afford it. It's a choice, available to everyone, regardless of circumstances." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Richardson?" "I want to offer you a job." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "A job? Doing what?" "Richardson Commercial Properties is launching a new community outreach program. We're buying and renovating properties in underserved neighborhoods, creating affordable housing and community centers. I need someone to run it, someone who understands what it's like to need help, who knows how the system works and how it fails people." "You want to hire me to run a program when I don't even have a place to live?" "I want to hire you because you don't have a place to live, because you understand what it means to be invisible to people like me, because you have the experience and the integrity to do the job right." Sarah shook her head. "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the offer, but I've been out of work for 6 months. I don't have professional clothes. I don't have an address. I don't even have a phone. How could I possibly?" "Those are logistics, Sarah. Solvable problems. The question is, do you want the job?" "Of course I want it, but then let's solve the logistics." Michael pulled out his phone and made a call. "Jennifer? It's Michael Richardson. I need you to prepare one of the furnished apartments in the River North building." "Yes, immediately." No, it's for a new employee. 1 bedroom is fine. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Sarah. You'll have an apartment by this afternoon. Fully furnished, utilities included. Consider it part of your compensation package. Sarah stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The apartment comes with the job, along with a salary of $75,000 a year, full benefits, and a budget of $2 million to start the program. $75,000? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Richardson, 6 months ago, I was making $42,000 as a social worker. You're talking about changing my entire life. Yes, I am. The question is, are you ready for that change? Sarah looked down at her hands, weathered from months of street life. Then back at Michael. Why me? You could hire someone with an MBA, someone with corporate experience. Because someone with an MBA has never slept in a doorway. Someone with corporate experience has never been turned away from a shelter because it was full. You have something that can't be taught in business school. You have empathy born from experience. Michael stood up and extended his hand. So what do you say, Sarah Martinez? Ready to change the world? Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. She saw something there she hadn't noticed before. Hope. Not just his hope for her, but her hope for herself, reflected back in his eyes. Yes, she said, taking his hand. I'm ready. The transformation began immediately. Michael arranged for Sarah to spend the afternoon shopping for professional clothes, using the company credit card. Then he had his driver take her to the apartment, a beautiful 1-bedroom in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Chicago River. As Sarah stood in her new living room that evening, still wearing one of her new business suits, she could hardly believe the turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been sleeping in doorways. Now she had a job, a home, and a purpose that aligned with everything she'd always believed in. Her first day at Richardson Commercial Properties was a whirlwind of meetings, introductions, and planning sessions. Michael had announced the new community outreach program to his staff, introducing Sarah as the director. She could see the skepticism in some faces. Who's this woman who'd appeared from nowhere to run a multi-million-dollar program? But Sarah didn't let the doubt discourage her. She threw herself into the work with a passion that impressed even Michael. She spent her days touring properties, meeting with community leaders, and developing strategies for affordable housing that would actually serve the people who needed it most. 3 months into the job, the program was already showing remarkable results. Sarah had managed to renovate 12 apartment buildings in underserved neighborhoods, creating over 200 units of affordable housing. More importantly, she'd implemented support services, job training, childcare, mental health counseling that addressed the root causes of homelessness rather than just its symptoms. Michael watched Sarah's success with a mixture of pride and amazement. She'd exceeded every expectation, bringing an authenticity and effectiveness to the program that he knew no traditional hire could have matched. But perhaps the most remarkable change wasn't in the program or the communities they were serving. It was in Michael himself. Working closely with Sarah, seeing the city through her eyes, had reconnected him with the values his mother had taught him so many years ago. He began visiting the properties regularly, not as a distant CEO, but as someone genuinely invested in the lives of the residents. He started a scholarship program for kids in the neighborhoods they served, remembering his own struggle to afford college. He even began volunteering at the community center Sarah had helped design, reading to children and helping with homework. One evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Michael and Sarah stood on the roof of one of their newly renovated buildings, looking out over the neighborhood that was slowly transforming around them. "You know," Sarah said, "I never properly thanked you. For what? For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. For believing that my circumstances didn't define my capabilities. Michael smiled. I should be thanking you. You gave me back something I didn't even realize I'd lost. What's that? My humanity. My connection to the world beyond boardrooms and profit margins. You reminded me why I wanted to succeed in the first place, not just to accumulate wealth, but to make a difference. Sarah laughed softly. It's funny how life works, isn't it? I lost everything, my job, my home, my security, and somehow found exactly what I needed. What do you mean? Purpose. I spent years as a social worker helping people navigate systems that weren't designed for them. But I could only help. One person at a time, one case at a time. Now with the resources you've given me, I can change entire communities. Michael nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes the best things come from the worst situations. As they stood there watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and crimson, both Sarah and Michael reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them together. A lost wallet had become a found purpose. A chance encounter had become a partnership that was transforming not just their lives, but the lives of hundreds of others. The program continued to grow and evolve. Sarah's team expanded to include other people who had experienced homelessness, bringing authenticity and insight that traditional social services often lacked. They developed innovative approaches to affordable housing, job training, and community development that became models for other cities across the country. Michael found himself speaking at conferences and industry events, not about real estate profits or market trends, but about the importance of corporate social responsibility and the transformative power of giving people genuine opportunities rather than temporary assistance. 2 years after that fateful day when Sarah returned his wallet, Michael stood before a crowd of investors, city officials, and community leaders at the grand opening of their largest project yet, a mixed-use development that included affordable housing, retail space for local businesses, a community center, and a job training facility. 2 years ago, Michael told the crowd, I thought I knew what success looked like. I measured it in dollars earned, deals closed, buildings owned. But I learned something that changed my perspective entirely. True success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about who you become in the process of achieving it. He gestured to Sarah, who stood nearby with several residents of their housing programs. Sarah Martinez taught me that integrity isn't conditional on circumstances, that dignity isn't determined by economic status, and that the most valuable investment you can make is in people. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the evening settled over the new development, Michael and Sarah found themselves alone in the community center, surrounded by the fruits of their unlikely partnership. So what's next? Michael asked. Sarah smiled, the same determined spark in her eyes that had first impressed him. Well, we've got requests from 12 other cities to help them develop similar programs. And I've been thinking about a national foundation. Michael laughed. Of course you have. The woman who wouldn't take a $200 reward now wants to change the entire country. Why not? Sarah said with a grin. After all, it started with one lost wallet. Who knows what we can accomplish if we really put our minds to it? As they walked out of the community center together, past the families who now had homes, and the children who now had safe places to play, both Michael and Sarah understood that their story was really just beginning. They had discovered something more valuable than money, more powerful than success, and more lasting than any business achievement. They had found their purpose in helping others find theirs. The wallet that brought them together had been lost and found. But what they had built together, trust, hope, and genuine change, could never be lost. It would continue to grow, touching lives and transforming communities for generations to come. In a world that often seemed to prioritize profit over people, Michael Richardson and Sarah Martinez had proven that sometimes the most successful investment is simply believing in someone else's potential and giving them the chance to prove it. Their partnership had started with an act of integrity, and grown into a legacy of hope. Proof that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back up, especially when someone believes in you enough to offer a hand. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.